So before we delve deeper into API development, it's important to understand the best way to handle browser differences. Now, the examples we'll look at in the following lessons are mostly cross-browser compatible, but you will encounter situations where two or more browsers implement the same thing differently. So here's some horrible code which novice developers often write when they encounter browser-specific issues. Now, in this case, they found out what the browser is and stored it in a browser variable. And then they run a different routine depending on the outcome. So why is that so bad? Well, the first problem is that determining which browser you have is actually far more difficult than you think. Now, all browsers identify themselves with a user agent string, which contains information about the browser, but also the OS platform and the rendering engine. So here's one for Opera. Now, which version of the browser is this? Now, if you're thinking it's Opera 9.8, you're wrong. It's Opera 12. Now, Opera has stuck the initial version number just here at 9.8. And that's because some developers were sniffing for the browser, but only looking at the first digit. So therefore, when Opera moved to version 10, some sites thought it was version 1. Okay, so double points if you can identify this browser. Any ideas? Well, in this case, it's Chrome 18 running on Windows 7. But it could have easily been Safari or even Firefox given the initial Mozilla reference. Now, the next problem we have is the sheer quantity of browsers available. While IE, Firefox, Chrome, Safari and Opera steal the limelight, there are hundreds of applications available. And each browser also has different versions, with differing capabilities. Now, do you really want to write code which caters for them all? Now, not only that, but some browsers identify themselves as others. And this facility is built directly into Safari and Opera because some sites will block them otherwise. So you can't always rely on dependable browser sniffing code. Now, the code on the previous page is already quite long and it's only looking for 5 different versions. But what happens when a new browser or version is released? Well, you need to go back, test your pages, and possibly add further handling functions. Finally though, it's simply not required. There is a far better method than browser sniffing. So rather than detecting for browser versions, it's far easier to detect their capabilities. So for example, most browsers support the XML HTTP request API, which is the basis of all AJAX calls. Unfortunately, it's not supported by IE7 and below. But those browsers offer an ActiveX object which is identical in every way, but initialized slightly differently. So we can write some code to use the correct object and call it appropriately. Here we're simply checking that the browser has the XML HTTP request object implemented. So if it is, we initialize it. And if it's not, then it's likely to be IE, so we use the ActiveX object alternative. So at this point, XHR is pointing to a browser API that we can use consistently elsewhere. Now, incidentally, we could shorten all this code using JavaScript's ternary notation. So if the expression before the question mark is true, then we return this object here. And if it's false, we return the one after the colon here. Now, this is a simple example, but it's far shorter, easier, and faster to execute than browser detection code. Now, if you ever find yourself detecting browsers, you're probably doing it wrong. So it's best to go back and look if there's a better way.